Now, the punk duo Bob Vylan sparked outrage during their set on Saturday, which was live streamed on the BBC. So they started off shouting for a free Palestine.
Free, free! Free, free! Free, free!
They then chanted, "Death, death to the IDF." That, of course, is the Israeli army. This was all in front of a screen claiming Israel's actions in Gaza amount to genocide. So there you can see the words on the back of the stage. The Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, condemned the chanting as appalling hate speech. Glastonbury's organisers said they were also appalled. Police are assessing whether any offences were committed. Henry, do you think the police should look at charges?
They can look at charges, but I think it's performative because you've got to decide whether there's a realistic prospect of conviction if you do put forward charges. You know, the Crown Prosecution Service is going to make that determination. And I suspect that if you put that before a jury, which has seen since the atrocities of October the 7th, the IDF prosecute a war, which has resulted in an international criminal court warrant for the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, the International Court of Justice assessing whether the IDF have committed war crimes, or maybe even committing genocide. I suspect a lot of people will be thinking that, compared to what the IDF has done in its defence of Israel, is not that controversial.
What do you think, Claudia, about that?
I think that's a separate story. I think this is exactly what it is. It's anti-Semitic incitement to violence. It's incredibly insulting. And I think it needs to be dealt with in the same manner that other hate speech has been dealt with in this country. I think Starmer's got an opportunity to show that he's not two-tier Keir. And, you know, if we're going to be talking about prosecuting people and putting them in prison for sending, you know, offensive tweets, then somebody that's broadcasting this on our national broadcaster and to a stage in front of thousands of people, it should be taken incredibly seriously.
Henry, not so separate to what the IDF is doing.
No. You said it was anti-Semitic. You've got to stop conflating what the IDF does with British Jewish identity. It's not. I mean, David Baddiel himself says it is anti-Semitic to assume that I, a British Jew, stand for everything that Israel does. That is absolutely wrong. The IDF is one of the most powerful, pound for pound, the most powerful army in the world, with access to the greatest technology, to the point that other armies around the world go to the IDF for tech.
I'm going to bring in... Go on.
I'm yet to meet a Jewish person that doesn't find the chant from the river to the sea, etc.
Benjamin Netanyahu uses that himself. From the river to the sea.
That is an anti-Semitic.
Yes, he does.
Incredibly insulting.
We can find a clip and run it.
Let's speak to the journalist Angela Epstein, vocal speaker on Jewish issues about this. I know you were very upset about Bob Vylan.
I was absolutely horrified, and I was glad one of my kids was supposed to be at Glastonbury and for completely practical reasons couldn't go. Imagine being a Jewish person in the midst of that crowd. Basically, the IDF is the army of the world's only Jewish state. So if you call for death to the IDF, you're by definition calling for the death of thousands, if not millions, of Jews all over the place. They should be arrested for incitement to, he should be arrested for incitement to violence. Unequivocally, this was a situation where you had a kind of almost Nuremberg rally type situation where there was a call to arms to bring together people and say, commit violent acts towards Israelis, towards Jewish people, and most of the Israeli army are Jewish. Just a couple of things I'd like to pull Henry up on. As a Jewish person, and probably the only Jewish person in this debate at this moment in time here in this studio, I would tell you that Jewish people, look at all the polls, are very closely, over 90% of us are closely aligned with Israel. It is the ancient Jewish homeland. Zionism is the right to self-determination. So it is for the birds, for other people, particularly people, respectfully, Henry, and I respect you enormously, who are not Jewish, to tell me that it is a nonsense to conflate anti-Israel and anti-Semitism.
I thought we were told that anti-Semitism is conflating being Jewish with being sympathetic to Israel. I thought that was the whole what anti-Semitism is. If I think because someone's Jewish they support Israel, then I am anti-Semitic, Angela.
No, not at all. Anti-Semitism, let's just call it what it is. It is old-fashioned Jew hatred. And it happens to be that the state of Israel is the only Jewish state in the world.
I
and I think to circle back to what we're just... Hang on.
You and I get on well. Angela, you and I got on well, both from the same area of Manchester, but I must pick you up on that when you say that I don't necessarily have the right to speak about this in this way. I'm a man of African origin. You, in previous debates, have often opined on what black people should feel about slavery, about colonialism, about taking MBEs. I could challenge you and say you have no right to tell me what I should feel about the trauma and the history of my people.
Henry.
Oh, go on.
Always in support. Always in support.
Well,
actually.
no.
I've been hugely
Time and again,
in support.
Okay,
Angela. But we can all talk about everyone else.
Pull out the footage and I will tell you. Time and again, I am hugely supportive of any ethnic minority which has been under the cosh precisely because of what their demographic is. And it is an absolute outrage to suggest that I would be anything else than that.
Angela,
in terms of this particular debate,
let Henry come back in.
In terms of this particular debate, we are talking about thousands of people at a so-called festival of peace and remember and inclusivity. And remember, it was the Nova Festival on October the 7th, where hundreds were murdered, raped, and beheaded when Hamas triggered this whole situation when they committed the atrocities on October the 7th. Glastonbury beamed around the world, and also we should be nodding equally to what the BBC's complicity in this for not somebody in editorial somewhere pressing a button and saying, crikey.
Should they have pressed a button, Henry? That's a good point.
I was surprised that it was not on a delay. I think who surprised.
Who presses that button? Who has the power to say, we don't want that?
I'm not sure. But I mean, very quickly, I think very few people, Angela, fair-minded people, would conclude that what Hamas did on the 7th of October 2023 was anything other than appalling, horrific, possibly an attempt at genocidal. Most people would agree with that. But the way that the IDF has prosecuted the war, initially of justice, and then revenge, and then mass slaughter, 60,000, possibly more, has removed a lot of people's sympathy. Sorry, I have to say this. Angela, I must finish. The sympathy that Israel and Israelis had from around the world has unfortunately been diminished because of the way the IDF has been prepared to kill 100 people to get one. And often those 100 include mainly women and children.
Let's go to a call. Jackie is in Cardiff. Hi, Jackie.
Hi, I'm outraged. I really don't know how we've got from... Right, the calling that I was phoning in on whether these people should be prosecuted or not, to anti-Semitism. I absolutely don't.
Well, Angela made the link.
I am not a Jew. But my God, there are thousands of Jews out there which are in agreement with somebody like myself who say that there is murder being committed on the same weekend. On the same weekend that we had every piece of our media covered with what was going on. Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, had done interviews and had done a piece from IDF soldiers who said they were being told to shoot people as they were running away. That was an Israeli newspaper. Now, it's okay. It's fine to think that is wrong, and that the Jewish people are still good people.
Let me bring Claudia. Hang on, Jackie. Claudia on that. That's a good point. That Jackie points out what happened in Gaza over the weekend was far worse than what happened at Glastonbury.
I think it's acceptable to condemn both things. It doesn't have to be an either-or situation. What happened at Glastonbury was disgusting. This guy, Bob Vylan, or the band Bob Vylan, Pascal Robinson Foster is the actual name of the singer of the band. He has a history, he has a record, a big track record of saying this kind of stuff. This should not have come as a surprise to the BBC. He did a similar thing at Coachella. He has been quoted as saying things like, kill the effing Queen, burn Britannia, dig up Maggie.
Elvis Costello's saying a song about that. I don't know.
I remember a certain John Lydon saying, God save the Queen, she ain't no human being, fascist regime. He's a punk. That's what they do, and it's in the context. Now, of course, if Bob Vylan had been saying this about people in this country, and there was a realistic prospect of them acting on what he said, as opposed to people, the heavily militarised people 3,500 miles away, the police might take it more seriously, but I suspect they won't.
Before we let you go, Angela, that's the point. He did attack the Israeli army, and if somebody said death to the Russian army, it wouldn't be as bad as calling for the death of individuals by name, would it?
Well, first of all, there are countless British nationals who serve in the IDF. I have friends who've gone to live in Israel and whose kids now are currently serving in the army, who will give you a far more accurate reportage of what's going on than the propagandizing I've just had to listen to now. I went to listen to a hostage speak last week, a released hostage, Eli Sharabi, who had been in Gaza for 400 days, capped 491 days, who was kicked and yelled at in the street by ordinary Gazans as he was dragged from one place to another. There are lots of different facets to this story, but in terms of the question that you've just asked me, as I said to you before, this is the world's only Jewish state. You call out Israel, you call out the Jews, which is why constantly anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic attacks have been spiralling in this country in the name of anti-Israel. A Jewish business down the road from where I live was covered with red paint. Jewish people on the way to synagogue each week are catcalled. There have been attacks in London. If it is a conflict thousands of miles away, why are Jewish people in this country taking the rap? So it is a nonsense to say that the two are not connected.
Thank you, Angela, so much for joining us. After the break, we're taking more of your calls on whether the police should pursue charges over the villain antics at Glastonbury. Let's see who we got on the line. It is Kathy in Cheshire. Hi, Kathy.
Yeah. Hi. Before I go on to what I'm saying, I just want to register my disgust at the starving people in Gaza. I know everyone all over the world is against this, and I don't know, nobody seems to be able to do anything. But anyway, the question is about the free speech. My attitude is, whether it comes from the stage, the television, or the internet, there's such a thing as voicing your concerns or peaceful protest, and then there is inciting others to riot and violence. Now, to me, that is sedition, and it never was allowed. I don't exactly know where the law is on what those young men have said, but agitating an excited mob could lead to people rushing out onto the street and murdering people. It can lead to a revolution. You don't push people over the edge.
So someone shouldn't be allowed to shout death to Russia?
Well, I don't like words. As I say, I don't exactly know. That comes in the law.
It's quite general, isn't it?
You're allowed to say. But I'm just saying, I find it frightening when people are shouting vicious things. I was on the side of Palestine before it became a fashionable cause. But I've never. I think this is. I don't like trouble, and I would not. Well, I think people have to remember that troublemakers who whip up things like this, they can end up on the other side of the barbed wire themselves, or mounting the guillotine themselves. All those people who are the troublemakers, when they've done that, they end up in trouble themselves.
Well, yeah, okay, thank you. Kwame in London, hi.
Hi.
What do you think?
I think this is a storm in a teacup, right? Music or punk, it's always had this tradition of being a bit subversive or very subversive. Yeah. And this just follows in a long line of that. You know, I mean, the idea that you should prosecute people for words is ridiculous. And if you're more offended by their words than the atrocities committed by the IDF, you need to give your head a wobble. But this is not anti-Semitic.
Let me put you on to Claudia here. Hang on.
Yeah, I agree. People shouldn't be prosecuted for words. But why are we then already doing it to other people? You know, when we hear about other hate speech, why is this two-tier system? Why are we prosecuting some and not others?
We shouldn't be. We shouldn't be. We should not be prosecuting for words. Full stop.
What if, Kwame, come on, that's ridiculous. What if your neighbour starts putting a message on on the front of his house saying, everyone go next door and kill Kwame? You'd say that's not a crime?
No, okay.
Come on.
They're degrees. You're taking a very extreme example.
There are degrees, exactly.
Hold on. But these are performers on a stage, all right, expressing their art. You may not agree with their message, but it's a message. You should be freedom of speech should allow freedom in art to express yourself.
Okay,
and
thank you. Georgina in Perthshire, hi. Hi, Georgina. Sorry, we don't have you. Elaine in West... Go on,
Sorry, mate, but the thing that frustrates me so much about this debate is the zero-sum nature of it. You can hate and find abhorrent and evil and possibly genocidal what happened on the 7th of October, what Hamas did on the 7th of October, 2023,
or in the war. Yeah.
Right? and also hate what the IDF is doing to the vast majority of victims who are defenceless women, children and young men. You can hate both.
OK. Elaine in West Lothian, hi.
Hiya, Jeremy. I think they should be charged. This is the Attorney General's chance, who said it's disgusting to even suggest there's two-tier policing. We'll prove it.
It's just the point Henry's making is if we have got in Gaza 60,000 people dead, and if some of them were shot...
A war that Hamas started on October the 7th, and people...
I was hoping you'd let me get to the end of the sentence there.
I blame the BBC.
You blame the BBC.
They're not putting out the true story. They're putting out Hamas propaganda as if it's gospel, and then it's getting flung around the world.
OK. Georgina in Perthshire, hi. We got you back. Hi, Georgina.
Hello. Sorry, phone signals look great. So I don't think Bob Vylan should be prosecuted. I don't think it's a hate crime. I think there's a whole contradiction, a whole hypocrisy of what's happening in the UK at the moment.
Claudia, what do you make of that?
I mean, I don't agree. I think it's, if we accept this, what's next? Do we just accept that you can call for the death of people and it's published on our national broadcaster and accepted by society?
Georgina?
I think people have been pushed to their limit, to be honest, now. I think Kneecap was silenced and Bob Vylan took on that course. The majority of people in the UK believe that the government isn't doing enough. People aren't doing enough. There are Jewish people saying not enough has been doing to help Palestine. And people are pushed to their limit and want to see change. They want to see action. They want to see something done to help the people of Palestine.
OK, yeah, maybe the point I was going to make to the previous caller who was kind of didn't let me finish was just that if it is the case that there have been 60,000 deaths in Gaza and more at the weekend who were queuing for food, it makes Vylan look like a kid in all this, doesn't it? Just absolutely unimportant. I don't know.
Perspective is so needed in this whole debate.
It's just like a sideshow. But I don't, we may see the BBC now in hot water over it. So it could be remains a very big story. I don't doubt we'll talk about it tomorrow as well.